He had been awake since 4:45 a.m. Just like every other morning, the house was silent. The world outside still dark. He sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, his back straight, his eyes calm. Years ago, mornings like this meant preparing for missions in places most people only saw on the news. Now it meant packing school lunches and checking the weather before waking his kids. He preferred it this way. After retiring from the Navy, he chose a quiet town where people minded their own business. No one there knew much about his past, and he never felt the need to tell them. To his neighbors, he was simply the polite dad who waved while mowing his lawn and fixed things without charging anyone. His body still carried the marks of a long career in special operations, faint scars on his arms, a stiffness in his knee when the weather changed. But he moved carefully, like someone who understood his limits. He stayed in shape, running before sunrise, doing pull-ups in garage while soft music played from an old speaker. Discipline never left him. At 6:15, he walked down the hallway and gently knocked on his daughter's door. She was starting an internship at a large company in the city, something she had worked hard for. He was proud of her, though he rarely said it in big emotional speeches. Instead, he showed it by waking up early, by making sure her car had gas, by checking the tires before long drives. "Time to get up," he said softly. A sleepy voice answered. A few minutes later, the house slowly filled with normal morning sounds. Running water, cabinet doors opening, light footsteps on the stairs. He made breakfast while listening to her talk about the event planned for that evening. The company was hosting a gathering at its headquarters. Employees were invited to bring family members. The CEO himself would be there. It was a big deal. "You should come," she said while scrolling through her phone. "It'll be good for me if they see I have supportive family." He smiled slightly. "I'll be there." He didn't care about CEOs or corporate events. Crowds were not his favorite place. But if it mattered to her, it mattered to him. After dropping her off later that morning, he returned home and spent the day working on small repair jobs. A loose fence board, a leaking faucet. He enjoyed working with his hands. It kept his mind steady. But even in peaceful moments, he stayed alert, not anxious, not paranoid, just aware. It was something he could not turn off. In the afternoon, he ironed a simple button-down shirt. Nothing fancy. He didn't own expensive suits. He had never cared much for them. He checked himself in the mirror before leaving. Clean shave, hair trimmed, posture straight. He looked like any other father heading to a company gathering. The corporate building stood tall in the city, made of glass and steel. It reflected the setting sun in soft orange light. Cars filled the parking lot. Laughter and conversation drifted through the open entrance. As he walked in, he felt a subtle shift in environment. Bright lights, background music, people dressed in business attire, conversations about projects, promotions, investments. He stayed close to his daughter at first, letting her introduce him to co-workers. He shook hands politely, made short, respectful conversation. He listened more than he spoke. The CEO arrived shortly after, tall, confident, surrounded by senior staff. Cameras flashed. Employees gathered around to greet him. He carried himself like someone used to being watched. The retired father observed quietly from a distance. He had met leaders before. Real leaders. The kind who walked into dangerous places without cameras or applause. He had learned long ago that titles did not always equal strength. Still, he respected anyone who carried responsibility. As the evening went on, the atmosphere grew more relaxed. People laughed louder. Some stepped outside toward the parking area for fresh air or private conversations. That was when he felt it. Not fear. Not danger exactly. Just something out of place. His eyes moved without drawing attention. For men stood near the far edge of the parking lot. They were not dressed like employees. They weren't talking like guests. Their body language was tight, controlled, focused on something beyond casual conversation. One of them kept scanning the building. Another checked his phone repeatedly, but not in a relaxed way. It looked more like timing. He told himself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe they were late guests. Maybe contractors. But his instincts had been trained for years in reading small details. The way shoulders tense before movement. the way people position themselves near exits, the way eyes communicate without words. He shifted slightly so he had a clearer view. His daughter was inside, laughing with a group near the refreshment table. She looked happy, confident. He exhaled slowly. Years ago, in places far away from home, he had learned to trust that quiet voice inside him, the voice that whispered when something wasn't right. Ignoring it had never ended well. He stepped outside under the excuse of taking a phone call. The air was cooler now. Streetlights flickered on. The sound of music from inside faded behind the glass doors. He leaned casually against a pillar, appearing relaxed. But his eyes studied the four men carefully. They weren't drunk. They weren't laughing. They weren't blending in. One of them walked toward a side entrance marked for authorized staff only. He tested the handle lightly, as if checking security. The retired father felt his muscles tighten, just slightly. This was not random. He glanced back toward the main doors. Security personnel stood inside, but they were distracted by guests asking for directions and taking photos. He considered his options. He was no longer in the military. He was not on a mission. This was not his responsibility. But protecting people had never been about job title for him. It was about principle. He stayed where he was, watching carefully, not wanting to escalate anything without certainty. The four men gathered closer together. One of them pointed subtly toward the interior office floors visible through the glass walls. Another nodded. He could feel the shift now. The same shift he had felt before operations. A quiet tension before movement. Inside, applause erupted as the CO began speaking near the stage area. His voice carried faintly through the open doors. The timing felt deliberate. The retired father straightened slightly. If something was about to happen, it would happen soon. He adjusted his stance, making sure he stood between the four men and the main entrance without appearing confrontational. One of them noticed him watching. Their eyes met. For a brief second, there was silence between them, even though they stood several yards apart. The man looked away first. That told him enough. He reached into his pocket, not for a weapon. He carried none, but for his phone. He typed a short message to his daughter. Stay inside. Stay with the group. No explanation. She responded with confused question mark. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow breath and stepped forward, closing some of the distance. His movements were calm, controlled. No sudden gestures. If he was wrong, he would simply look like an overprotective father. If he was right, he needed to be close. The music inside grew louder. Applause continued, and the four men began to move, not toward the party, toward the restricted side entrance. He felt it fully now. Something was about to change, and the quiet life he had worked so hard to build was about to collide with the past he thought he had left behind. He did not rush. Rushing made people nervous. It made mistakes happen. Instead, he walked at an easy pace, as if he were just another guest stepping outside to stretch his legs. The four men were now closer to the restricted side entrance. One of them stood watch, his back half turned toward the building, pretending to check his phone. The others whispered to each other in low voices. The retired father stopped a few steps away, close enough to hear fragments of their conversation, far enough to avoid drawing attention. 2 minutes, one of them muttered. After he finishes, another replied. That was enough to confirm what his instincts had already told him. He scanned the area again. No immediate help nearby. Security was still inside, focused on the main event. Guests continued to laugh and talk, unaware that anything unusual was happening just outside the glow of the lights. This was how problems always started. Quietly, small, ignored. He cleared his throat lightly, just loud enough to be noticed. Evening, he said in a calm, friendly voice. All four men looked at him at once. Up close, he could see more details. Tension in their jaws. The way their feet were positioned, ready to move. The lack of surprise in their eyes. They had been expecting interference, just not from someone like him. Private area, one of them said. His tone was firm but not aggressive. You should head back inside. The retired father nodded, as if considering the advice. I was just looking for the restroom, he replied casually. Signage here isn't very clear. The man frowned slightly. It's inside. I see, he said. Mind pointing me in the right direction? It was a small test. Instead of answering, the man took a step forward, placing himself between the retired father and the door. That single move confirmed everything. This was no misunderstanding. Inside the building, applause rose again as the CEO continued speaking. Laughter followed. The timing was deliberate. Whoever these men were, they were waiting for the moment when attention was fully focused elsewhere. The retired father felt a familiar calm settle over him. Not excitement, not anger, clarity. He shifted his weight slightly, placing himself at a better angle. He made sure his hands were visible, relaxed at his sides. He did not want to escalate things, unless there was no other choice. Relax, another man said, trying to sound casual. We're just waiting for someone. Sure, the retired father replied. Then you won't mind waiting inside like everyone else. The man let out a short laugh. You're funny, but there was no humor in his eyes. A young employee stepped outside at that moment. Phone pressed her ear. She slowed when she noticed the group, her expression uncertain. Hey, one of the men snapped, turning toward her. This area is closed. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. That was the moment the retired father decided. He stepped forward just enough to place himself between the men and the employee. Actually, he said calmly, she's allowed to be here. The man's face hardened. This doesn't concern you. It does now, the retired father replied. The air changed instantly. The four men exchanged quick looks. The one nearest the door subtly reached toward his jacket. Not fast, not obvious, but obvious enough to train eyes. The retired father raised his hand slightly, palm out. No need for that, he said evenly. Let's not make this worse than it has to be. The man sneered. You don't even know who you're talking to. That's fine, he replied. I just know you don't belong here. The employee backed away quietly, slipping inside through the main doors. She did not run. She did not scream, but her relief was clear. The four men were no longer pretending. Move, one of them said. His voice was low now, controlled. The retired father did not move. He had faced worse threats in darker places. These men were dangerous, but they were also impatient. That impatience would be their weakness. He kept his voice calm. Security is going to notice this sooner or later. One of the men glanced toward the building. Not soon enough. The retired father could feel his heart rate increase, but his breathing stayed steady. He positioned himself so he could see all four men without turning his back to any of them. Last chance, the man closest to him said, "Step aside." Instead of answering, the retired father took a slow step closer. Not threatening, just confident. That confidence unsettled them. Inside, the CEO's speech reached a louder moment. Applause echoed through the glass walls. Phones were raised. Cameras flashed. The four men made their move. Two of them tried to slip past him toward the door, while another attempted to grab his arm. The four stayed back, watching. The retired father reacted instantly. Years of training took over, not in a dramatic way, but in quiet efficiency. He shifted his body, redirecting the grab without striking. He stepped into the path of the two men, blocking the door with his shoulder. "Stop," he said sharply. They did not. One of them lost his balance as his momentum was turned against him. He stumbled back, colliding with another. The third man recovered quickly and tried again, frustration flashing across his face. "Get him out of the way," someone hissed. The retired father planted his feet. He did not swing wildly. He did not shout. He controlled space. A quick movement to keep distance. A firm grip to prevent a rush. He used leverage and timing, not strength alone. The fourth man stepped in now, clearly annoyed that things were not going according to plan. From inside the building, a few guests began to notice the commotion. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The CEO, mid-sentence, glanced toward the doors. What he saw did not make sense at first. A middle-aged father standing alone, calm but unmoving, while four men struggled around him, unable to get past. Security finally started moving toward the exit. The four men realized time was running out. "Forget it," one of them growled. "We're out." They tried to retreat. The retired father did not chase them. He simply made sure they left without harming anyone. As they backed away toward the far end of the parking lot, one of them turned and pointed at him. "This isn't over," he said. The retired father met his gaze without flinching. "It is for tonight." The men disappeared into the darkness between parked cars, their plan clearly ruined. Security arrived moments later, breathless and confused. "Sir, are you all right?" one of them asked. He nodded. "They're gone." Inside, the CEO had stopped speaking. The room buzzed with quiet confusion as people whispered and checked their phones. The retired father stepped back toward the entrance, scanning the area one last time. His body slowly released the tension it had been holding. His daughter rushed toward him from inside, worry written all over her face. "Dad, what happened?" He gave her a reassuring smile. "Nothing you need to worry about." But as he looked past her, toward the CEO who was now watching him closely, he knew one thing for certain. The quiet night he had hoped for was gone. And the people inside that building were about to start asking questions. The building did not return to normal right away. People tried to laugh it off, but the mood had changed. Conversations were quieter now. Eyes kept drifting toward the glass doors and the parking lot beyond them. Security staff stood closer to the entrances, speaking into radios and checking corners they had ignored earlier. The retired father stayed near the wall, not wanting attention. He watched his daughter talk with her co-workers again, pretending everything was fine. He could see the effort it took for her to relax. She kept glancing his way, searching his face for answers. He gave her a small nod. That was his way of saying she was safe. The CEO stepped away from the stage and spoke briefly with his assistants. They looked shaken. One of them kept replaying something on a phone, probably a video someone had recorded before being asked to stop. After a few minutes, the CEO walked over. He did not arrive with an attitude. He did not look angry. If anything, he looked unsettled. "Sir," he said carefully, "may I speak with you for a moment?" The retired father nodded. "Of course." They stepped aside, just far enough from the crowd to talk, without being overheard. "I'm told you prevented a serious situation," the CEO said. "Security is still trying to understand what those men wanted." The retired father shrugged lightly. "I just noticed something didn't feel right." The CEO studied him for a moment. "You handled it very professionally." The retired father did not answer right away. He had learned long ago that silence often said more than explanations. "We're grateful," the CEO continued. "Most people would have frozen or panicked." "I didn't want anyone getting hurt," the retired father replied. His voice was calm, almost flat. Security soon confirmed that the four men had left the area completely. Cameras had caught parts of their movements, but not enough to identify them clearly. Whatever they had planned, it was unfinished. The CEO let out a slow breath. "We owe you," he said. "At the very least, please stay. Let us make sure your family is comfortable." The retired father thought about leaving. Part of him wanted to take his daughter home, lock the doors, and return to the quiet life he valued. But another part of him understood that questions were coming whether he stayed or not. "All right," he said, for a little while. The event continued, though it never fully recovered its earlier energy. People smiled for photos, but the smiles felt thinner. Laughter came, but it did not linger. The retired father noticed something else too. He was being watched, not by guests, by people who understood what they had seen. A senior security manager approached him later. The man had the posture of someone with experience, someone who had been trained beyond basic protocols. "You mind if I ask where you learned to move like that?" the man said quietly. The retired father looked at him, then away. "Old habits." The manager nodded slowly. He did not press further. As the night went on, the retired father kept his awareness wide. He checked exits, watched reflections in glass, listened for changes in tone and sound. He hated that part of himself. Sometimes it meant he was never fully at rest, but it also meant his family was safe. When the event finally ended, the parking lot filled again. Guests said their goodbyes. Cars pulled out one by one. The city lights flickered in the distance. The retired father walked his daughter to her car. "Dad," she said quietly, "you stopped them, didn't you?" He paused. "I slowed them down. She looked at him, her eyes searching. You always said your old job was boring. He smiled faintly. Compared to raising you, it was. She laughed, but there was emotion behind it. I'm glad you were there. So am I, he said. They drove home in silence for a while. The roads were mostly empty. The city slowly faded behind them. When they reached the house, he checked the doors and windows out of habit. He waited until she was inside before turning in for the night. Sleep did not come easily, not because he was afraid, but because his mind replayed the details, the timing, the coordination, the way the men had tested the entrance. They had not been random troublemakers. They had been prepared. That thought stayed with him. The next morning, he woke early again. He went for his run, letting the cold air clear his head. His body moved easily, but his thoughts stayed sharp. After breakfast, there was a knock at the door. He knew who it would be before he opened it. The CEO stood on the porch, this time without assistants or cameras. Just a simple jacket and tired eyes. I hope this is an inconvenience, the CEO said. No, the retired father replied. Come in. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where school lunches were usually packed. I reviewed the footage again this morning, the CEO said. You saw things before anyone else did. I've had practice, the retired father replied. The CEO leaned forward. May I ask what you did before retirement? The retired father stared into his coffee for a long moment. He had avoided this question for years. I served, he said finally. Special operations. The CEO's expression shifted. Understanding settled in. That explains a lot, he said softly. The retired father did not elaborate. He never did. The CEO nodded respectfully. I don't want publicity. I don't want stories. I just want to understand what could have happened if you weren't there. The retired father considered his words carefully. People would have been scared, he said. Confusion would have helped them. The CEO swallowed. And now, the retired father said, you improve security. You prepare your people. And you don't assume danger always looks dangerous. The CEO listened closely. Before leaving, he stood and offered his hand. Thank you, he said, not as a CEO, as a person. The retired father shook his hand. That's enough for me. After the door closed, the retired father sat alone for a moment. The house was quiet again. He had hoped that chapter of his life was over. But deep down, he knew something important. Once you learn how to protect others, that part of you never really retires. And whatever those four men had planned, the ripples from stopping them were only just beginning. The days after the event passed more quietly than he expected. No reporters showed up. No strangers knocked on the door asking questions. Life returned to its normal rhythm, at least on the surface. Morning runs, simple meals, short conversations that mattered more than long speeches. But underneath that calm, things had shifted. He could feel it. His daughter went back to work, but she was different now, more alert, more thoughtful. She paid attention to exits, to people standing too close, to moments when rooms suddenly grew too quiet. He noticed, and it bothered him. He had always tried to protect her not just from danger, but from the weight of his past. He wanted her world to be lighter than the one he had known. One evening, as they washed dishes together, she finally spoke. You never told me what you really did before, she said, not accusing, just curious. He rinsed a plate slowly. There are things are easier left unsaid. She nodded. I get that. I didn't know you were still carrying it. He looked at her then. I'm not carrying it, he said gently. I learned from it. That seemed to satisfy her. A few days later, the CEO called. He did not ask for favors. He did not offer money. He simply asked if they could talk again. This time, they met at a quiet cafe far from the office. No suits, no assistants, just two people trying to understand something larger than themselves. I've been thinking about what you said, the CEO admitted, about not assuming danger always looks dangerous. The retired father stirred his coffee. Most of the time, it doesn't. The CEO sighed. We reviewed our systems. On paper, everything was fine. But in real life, he shook his head. In real life, people hesitate. They always do, the retired father replied. They wait for permission, for certainty. And you don't. He smiled slightly. I wait for patterns. The CEO leaned back, studying him. I want to make changes. Real ones. Training that goes beyond manuals. The retired father was quiet for a moment. Training only works if people believe it matters. I believe it matters, the CEO said. That night could have ended very differently. The retired father nodded. It could have. They talked for over an hour. About responsibility. About fear. About the difference between reacting and preparing. When they parted, the CEO thanked him again, this time with a deeper understanding. The retired father walked home instead of driving. He needed the movement, the air, the space to think. He had not planned on being pulled back into this world. But life rarely followed plans. That night, he had a dream, not a nightmare. Just fragments, empty streets, distant sounds. The familiar feeling of being alert, but alone. He woke before dawn and sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly until the past loosened its grip. By mid-morning, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was two people from corporate security. Not aggressive, not demanding, respectful. We're reviewing an incident that may be connected, one of them explained. We were hoping you could help us understand something. He listened carefully as they described suspicious activity in another location owned by the company. Different city, same pattern, the same kind of patience. That wasn't random, he said when they finished. Someone was testing responses. The security team exchanged glances. What do you suggest? One of them asked. He thought for a moment. You stop thinking like a company and start thinking like people who might be targeted. They listened, not because he demanded attention, but because he spoke with calm certainty. Over the next few weeks, he found himself advising quietly, not leading drills, not wearing uniforms, just walking through buildings, pointing out small things others missed, blind spots, assumptions, moments when politeness overrode safety. He never raised his voice, never tried to impress anyone, and that made people listen more. At home, life adjusted. His daughter asked better questions, not about danger, but about values. How do you stay calm when everything feels like it could go wrong? She asked one night. He thought carefully. You focus on what you can control, and you let go of the rest. She smiled. You make it sound simple. It isn't, he admitted, but it's worth practicing. One afternoon, the CEO visited the house again. This time, he brought no agenda. They sat on the porch, watching the sun dip low. You could have taken advantage of this, the CEO said quietly. Fame, money, influence. The retired father shook his head. I already had influence once. It came with a cost. And now I choose where my energy goes. The CEO nodded slowly. I wish more people understood that. Before leaving, the CEO paused. If those men come back, they won't, the retired father said calmly. How do you know? Because they didn't get what they wanted, he replied, and they were seen. That certainty stayed with the CEO long after he drove away. Weeks passed, then months. The incident faded from conversation, but not from memory. The retired father returned fully to his quiet routines. Early mornings, steady habits, small joys. But he also accepted something he had resisted for a long time. His past was not something to hide. It was something to carry with care. One evening, his daughter sat beside him on the couch. I'm glad you're my dad, she said simply. He swallowed, emotion catching unexpectedly in his throat. I'm glad I get to be, he replied. Outside, the neighborhood was peaceful. Porch lights glowed softly. A dog barked in the distance. The world felt ordinary again, and yet stronger for what had been learned. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is not to fight, not to chase recognition, not to relive old battles. It is to stand ready when it matters, and then return quietly to the life they worked so hard to protect. Life has a way of testing whether lessons truly stick. Several months passed with no sign of trouble. Seasons changed. Mornings grew colder, then warmer again. The retired father settled fully back into his routines. He volunteered at a local repair workshop once a week, helped neighbors when something broke, and never talked about the night at the corporate building unless someone asked directly. Most didn't. People moved on quickly. But he hadn't forgotten. One afternoon, his daughter came home earlier than usual. She looked thoughtful, not worried, just serious in a way that made him look up from what he was doing. "They're changing how things work at the company," she said. "Training, procedures, even how people are taught to notice things." He nodded. "That's good." "They said it started because of you," she added. He paused. "It started because people were willing to learn." She smiled. "You never take credit." He shrugged. "Credit doesn't keep people safe." That evening, they cooked dinner together. It was nothing special. Simple food, comfortable silence, the kind of moments he valued more than anything. Later that night, he sat alone on the porch. The air was quiet, stars faintly visible above the streetlights. He thought about the men from that night, not with anger, with understanding. They had chosen a path that relied on others not paying attention, on fear, on hesitation. That path had failed, and paths that fail once rarely succeed again. A week later, the CEO sent a short message. No meeting request, no questions, just a thank you. The retired father read it once and put the phone away. That chapter was closed, or so it seemed. One Saturday morning, while at the grocery store, he noticed a small commotion near the entrance. Nothing dramatic, just raised voices. A delivery driver arguing with a store employee. People slowed to watch. He watched too, not because he expected danger, but because awareness had become part of who he was. The argument faded quickly. No harm done. No need for him to step in. As he walked back to his car, he realized something important. The goal was never to act. The goal was to be ready. That understanding brought him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. At home, his daughter was filling out paperwork for a promotion opportunity. She looked excited and nervous all at once. "Do you think I'm ready?" she asked. He looked at her carefully. "You've been ready longer than you think." She laughed. "You always say that." "And I'm usually right," he replied. She got the promotion. The celebration was small. Just the two of them, sharing takeout and talking about plans. She spoke about the future with confidence, not arrogance. Not fear, balance. He listened, proud in a quiet way. That night, as he cleaned up the kitchen, she stopped him. "You know," she said, "I used to think strength was about being loud, or powerful, or in charge. And now," he asked, "now I think it's about knowing when to step forward and when to step back." He smiled. "That's a good definition." Months later, the company released an internal report about improved safety and awareness. It never mentioned his name. He preferred it that way. But people changed. They paid attention. They trusted instincts. They spoke up sooner. That mattered. The retired father continued his quiet life. He aged a little, slowed a little, learned to rest when his body asked for it. But his mind stayed sharp. One evening, he received an invitation to attend a small recognition dinner. No press, no speeches. Just a thank you from people who understood what might have happened. He declined politely. Instead, he took his daughter out for a walk. They talked about nothing important, and everything important. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" He thought for a long moment. "I miss the people," he said honestly. "I don't miss the danger." She nodded. "I'm glad you're here." "So am I," he said. As the year came to an end, the world continued as it always did. Busy, loud, unpredictable. But in one quiet neighborhood, a retired father woke up early, made coffee, and prepared for another ordinary day. And that was enough, because heroism does not always look like action. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like showing up for the people who matter. Sometimes it looks like a calm presence in a room that never realizes how close it came to chaos. The CEO would remember that night for the rest of his life. The employees would remember the feeling of safety that followed. And the daughter would remember the moment she truly understood who her father was. Not a legend, not a story, just a man who chose, again and again, to protect what mattered most. And when the world did not need him to step forward anymore, he stepped back, quietly, proudly, at peace.